Hello YouTubers, and welcome to S.P.L.U.S.H, the Human Revolution. Today I'm going to be finishing up a few points that I left out of the last video, and we're going to essentially call this part 2. I'm not sure if there's going to be a part 3, probably, but probably not for a while, because I want to do a few other things that are more, I don't know, fun, I guess. So, in the meantime, let's finish this video. It's probably not going to be as long as the other one. In fact, probably most of them are going to be shorter, but we'll see. So, last time I talked a lot about the history of religion and science. Maybe a little bit more about religion than science, but the two go hand in hand. And I wanted to address one thing that I forgot to address previously, and that is that the Christian faith gets a lot of flack for being the source of all war, and that's not true. You see, the Catholic Church, which is responsible for several wars, has always been under the thumb of a different government. Originally, it was controlled by the Roman government, and that's why it was called the Roman Orthodox Church. The church was an extension of the empire, not the other way around. Later on, the church grew to span several different countries. After Rome collapsed into a bunch of different countries, the church kind of stayed on. And so it's sort of autonomous, but not really, because it was still under the thumb of aristocracy. You see, the church was controlled by corrupt officials, who would let their relatives in more easily, and etc., etc. A cardinal had a lot of sway, and they could elect a deacon all on their own, and a group of cardinals could select the pope, and so on and so forth. And these people were powerful and a handful of families basically ran the church. And so it was just as corrupt as any aristocratic nation, which, if you look at Europe, that is pretty darn corrupt. I'm just saying. I mean, aristocrats doesn't work. It just doesn't work. And so you can't really blame Christianity for that, especially since the rest of Christianity saw this and broke away at the first available opportunity, which was the discovery of the Americas. That's when Martin Luther pinned his many different complaints about the church, and that's when things really started to change. So it's hard to say that all of the world's problems are because of Christianity, because they're really not. The world has a lot of problems, and yes, the Catholic Church did cause. Also, it wasn't just the church, it was the families that controlled the church, the government group that controlled the church. I know a lot of people think that the church controlled the government, and to a point it did, but it was the same families that were in charge of both. I mean, the king may have been under the thumb of the cardinal, but the cardinal was his cousin, so what difference does it make? I mean, this wasn't always the case, but there are cases, and really, if you're going to judge that group because they were corrupt, yes, that's reasonable, but judging the rest of the groups that branched off from that, not reasonable. What else is there to talk about, really? I mean, I guess I could go over the history of science and how it evolved. Okay, so science was, well, it's essentially as old as humanity. Dating back to the earliest days of ancient Greece, people practiced science. Physics and astronomy were developed. Physics, astronomy, geometry, and several other forms of mathematics were developed exclusively in ancient Greece. And of course, methods were lost and redeveloped elsewhere, and then lost and redeveloped, and it's just a horrible mess. But science didn't really take hold of the world until I want to say about 600-700 years ago, give or take. Up until then, it was practiced by scholars, but not by the people. And it was only used when convenient, which, surprisingly, not that often. I mean, science was used for certain small things like manufacturing glass, gunpowder. It was never used for understanding the universe. It wasn't used for the sake of knowledge. It was used for the sake of a cool knick-knack here or there. And of course, in early days, science was not very well developed. I mean, Greeks believed that all disease was caused by an imbalance of 5 different fluids within the body, and that restoring the fluids would cure you. Now, knowing what we do about microbes and viruses and all these different things, that's obviously false. But that was what they believed for eons, because they didn't know any. They couldn't see bacteria the way we can. But notable scientists, God, there are too many to list. But I'm going to go over a few that are important in both science and religion. So, first example, and I guess we're leading with the ace here, but Archimedes. Now, a lot of people haven't really heard of Archimedes, but he's the guy who first calculated pi, and he did so using a ruler. Actually, it wasn't even a ruler, it was just a flat stick with marks on it. I mean, I guess you could call it a ruler, but they didn't have the same units of measurement, and whatever. He used a ruler and a pen to mark to mark polygons until he built up to what is almost a perfect circle. And he used that to calculate pi up to, I think it was like 30 decimal points, which was ridiculous for the time. And he also developed calculus 3,000 years before Newton developed it. And if he wasn't killed by the Roman invasion and his work destroyed, we would have had the same mathematics that sent aircraft into space 3,000 years earlier. Just imagine what we could have done with that knowledge and how far along we would be now. And he was a stout believer in the Greek faith, which is typically called paganism nowadays, but or Greek mythology. It's actually still practiced, so calling it mythology is kind of rude, but he was a practitioner of that, and I believe his primary following would have been to Hephaestus. And while we're on the subject, Newton, also a follower. I mean, he was Christian, and yeah. Halley, as in Halley's Comet. I know that's not what he should be known for, but that's what he's known for. Michael Faraday, who, Faraday. Einstein, we already discussed. Or how about this? We wouldn't have any of our modern numbers if it wasn't for the Arabic faith, for Islam, more specifically. Because of the Islamic faith and leaders of Islam in, I forget what the year was. It was a long time ago, before Rome. The Islamic people, after Greece, but before Rome, the Islamic people developed the Arabic numeral system that we use today. They developed a lot of astronomy that had been lost due to wars and stuff, and they developed a lot of interesting things. For example, a light show where they literally used a lens to project a person's image into a tent as basically a movie. I mean, it was still being acted out in person, but you were watching it through a refracted lens, and that is just so awesome. I mean, that concept was originally discovered in ancient China, but lost when Qin took over. I think I discussed that in the last video. There are so many amazing things. Well, Alexander the Great, who found the city of Alexandria and also commissioned the lighthouse, which was the greatest collection of knowledge the world had ever seen up until the invention of the internet even. I mean, it was massive. It just makes every library today look like nothing. But it burned down because, war. So much stupid involved with war. But again, Alexander, religious. I mean, he followed the Greek path as well. Yeah, there's really no reason to separate science and religion and say that they're mutually exclusive or that they don't agree with each other, because they do. I mean, every single thing about it agrees. I challenge you to find me one thing about Christianity that doesn't make sense scientifically. And before you go posting crap about evolution, know that, as I stated in my last video, evolution and Darwinian evolution, or modern evolution and Darwinian evolution, are not the same thing, and Darwinian evolution is valid and reasonable, and I, as a Christian, will accept that. I mean, it's a perfectly reasonable explanation for things, but the modern version twist on that is just so bizarre, and what else can I say that I haven't said already? I mean, I suppose I should probably cover a couple of other religions and see how they relate. The only problem with that is I don't really know most of them as well as I do mine, and I'm afraid I wouldn't quite do it justice. I do know the basic history, but that's not really helpful to you guys. I advise you to do your own research and come to your own conclusions. If you're not religious, that's fine. If you are, that's fine. That's the whole point here. Science does not discount anything. If anything, I am more able to understand science because of my religion than I would be without it, because the two actually reinforce each other quite a bit if you take the time to read into both. Wow, this video ended up being a lot shorter than I thought it would. Well, until next time, which is probably going to be today because I'm going to upload 5 or 6 other fun little videos that I've been wanting to do. And I'll probably get to a couple of more important things within the next week or so. I'm not sure how quickly I'll be posting these, but it'll be fairly regular, so look forward to that. And as always, vive le sploosh.